This is a Rough Tiger production.
And you, and you, and you, and you were there. Some of it wasn't very nice, but most of it was beautiful.
Oh, no, we're recording again.
Recording in progress. Time for you to
Hello,
talk.
everybody.
Hello. Hi.
Hey, listeners, this is Dream Idiots. I'm Morris, and the fellow on the other end there is Bryan. Welcome
Howdy.
back for episode 70, where we tell each other stories every week, and you are along for the ride. Bryan, do you have any announcements?
No story updates. We'll have some story updates, I know, coming here soon. The only interesting update, if you happen to be listening to us in Texas, at some point, I think perhaps as soon as July, some select episodes of Dream Idiots will be on the radio in San Antonio, which is kind of cool. And those details will be revealed later on. We're kind of excited about that. And we appreciate everything you're doing for us with all the listening and the sharing and the reviews and the ratings. Please keep that up and find us online and all the usual places. We're Dream Idiots on Instagram and Facebook, and you can email us at dreamidiotspodcast@gmail and hit dreamidiots.com.
Yes,
So there you
those
have
will be those will be edited episodes because, quote, the deep voiced one is a potty mouth, I think is what the program
Yes.
director said.
The FCC is going to have a stroke if we air these. So they're being selectively edited.
Very cool. Yes, that's very exciting news for us. We've got some other things coming down the pipe that we'll be talking to you about as the summer progresses. Not that we would know that in Denver because it's like Hawaii up here. It's raining every day about 2:00. Bryan, I get to go first because it's episode 70. Is that correct?
You're correct.
All right. Bryan, you ever heard of a guy by the name of Astance Alderberry?
I have not. It does not ring a bell.
That is good because I just made that name up.
Okay.
That's not who I'm talking about.
That'd be awful gaslighting. Hey, yes, I do.
But right now, some poor fellow with that name is looking around going, God damn it. Someone is talking about me. Some asshole is making fun of my name. No, I'm going to tell you about a fellow by the name of Morris Berg. And he went by Mo. So this is not an attempt, or is it, for me to inject more Morrises into the conversation. I want to tell you about Mo Berg. He came into the world March 2nd, 1902 in New York City, as most good Morrises do. His family was Jewish, as most good Morrises are. He was the third of three children born to immigrant Ukrainian parents. His family lived for a while in Harlem and then West Newark, New Jersey. He loved learning from an early age. He wanted to go to school as soon as he could from the age of 3.5. He said, Mom, let me go to school. He had to wait for a while before he did that. But he graduated from high school at the age of 16. Along the way, he also developed a love of, as most kids did at his age and in that era, baseball.
Okay.
So he went to college, where he played first base and shortstop during his college career from 1919 to about 1922-23. Bryan, he played at Princeton.
Nice.
So there's a chance that he might have bumped into your grandfather somewhere on campus.
There's a very good chance, yeah.
Yes, so that places him in the same era. Your granddad was class of 24?
No,
right?
He was class of 21 or 22.
Okay, so they would have been there roughly the same time. Now, Mo Berg was neither a strong hitter nor fast base runner, but he did possess an accurate and powerful throwing arm, as well as a keen mind, both inside and outside the game. He and Princeton's second baseman, now how's this for a name? Crossan Cooper. They would chatter back and forth in Latin when opposing runners were on base as to what they're going to do next. Speaking of languages, I always admire someone who speaks a few languages. Berg did speak quite a few. In addition to Latin, he had Greek, French, Spanish, Italian, German, Hebrew, Yiddish, and Sanskrit in his linguistic toolbox.
Wow.
That's not too bad. His senior year, his bat came alive for a .337 batting average, Not too bad. He was also the team captain. Against hated rivals Yale and Harvard, he managed an astonishing 661 batting average. Now, if I played for the Mets and I could guarantee 661 against the Braves and the Phillies every year,
right.
I would take that.
Right.
He also, somewhere along the way, graduated from Columbia Law School. So far, I'm telling probably a pretty common story about folks who played baseball, even if he did come from the Ivy Leagues. His professional career spanned 15 seasons, most of them in the majors. He played for the Brooklyn Robins early on, and of course, they eventually became the Brooklyn Dodgers. Most of his time he did spend in the American League with the Cleveland Indians, the Chicago White Sox, the Washington Senators, who were by and large an awful team, but they did win a World Series, I think in 25 or so. He wasn't with them when they did that. But he did win the AL pennant with them in 1933, and he ended out his career with the Boston Red Sox. He was actually changed over to catcher for the bulk of his career. And when you think about it, that's a position that really suited his intellect.
Oh, yeah.
You have to have a certain kind of mindset to be a catcher. I personally think it's one of the most difficult positions, not just in baseball, but in all the sports, really.
Yeah.
It's a position which suited his intellect and his throwing arm, getting that ball, to second base and so forth. But his intelligence in the baseball world often made him the butt of jokes. Casey Stengel once called him the strangest man in baseball. Another catcher by the name of Buck Krause told him, "Them college degrees you got ain't learned you to hit the curveball better than me." He was also known for his appearances on a radio quiz show called Information Please, where he successfully tackled subjects like Greek and Latin etymology and European and Far East history. He, in fact, traveled to the Far East. In 1934, he went to Japan with no less than Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, who I think were probably pretty good baseball players, if I recall correctly. This was part of a 17-game exhibition tour of Japan. His final stats in the majors, 241 batting average, 441 hits, 206 runs batted in. I'll let you be the judge of that because you know more about baseball than
241 batting average. I mean, above the Mendoza line, not bad.
That's exactly how I described it in my notes. Above the Mendoza line, which wouldn't be invented.
Not Hall of Fame, no.
50 years. No, not Hall of Fame.
Right.
So what happened after baseball to Mo Berg? Well, Europe fell into chaos in World War II, and his career ended with the beginning of World War II, 1939. Berg felt it was time to move into a new career. He felt his innate skills could aid the war effort, particularly in the intelligence arena. So after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in December 7th of 1941, Berg turned over the home movies he had taken from the roof of a Tokyo hospital to military intelligence. His earlier trip to Japan, the one I just talked about, that he took with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, he had popped up to the top of this hospital and taken pictures of downtown Tokyo. And that had done more for the United States than promoting America's pastime. Those films were later used in strategic planning in the war effort against Japan. So Berg applied to work for the Office of Strategic Services, which, of course, the OSS is the forerunner to what would become the Central Intelligence Agency. One of his first missions sent him into Yugoslavia to study resistance groups. He gathered information which helped the U.S. government determine the best methods and the best groups to support in their struggles against Axis occupation. So what is the best way we can fight German military in Europe? Because when we often romanticize the French resistance, but there was all kinds of resistance. The Dutch resistance, Yugoslavian, Hungarian, there was all kinds of people setting up these clandestine groups. In 1943, after Italy surrendered to the Allies, Berg was assigned to Project Larsen, which he assumed had to do with interrogating Italian scientists about military scientific projects. But true to OSS fashion, this, Bryan, was just a smokescreen, a con, a put-on, a three-card Monte, a bit of legerdemain, a snow job. You probably get it by now. Stanley Lavelle, the man who was brought into the OSS by its director, Wild Bill Donovan, to create weapons and devices for the organization's dirty tricks department, the research and development department, revealed that Berg would in fact be working on something called Project Azusa. A to Z in the USA. Project Azusa. And I'm going to talk about Lavelle actually in another story. So I'll save his information for later. But Project Azusa was indeed designed to gather information on the Italians' knowledge of something, but it wasn't what he thought it was, Berg, that is. It was designed to gather information on the Italians' knowledge of Germany's atomic bomb program, and specifically the work of Werner Heisenberg. So the plan was Berg would go undercover in Rome and pretend to be interested in radar and rocketry. And he was told not to use words like atomic or radioactive, but instead use terms like secret weapons or inquire into labs or factories with, quote, extreme security measures and, quote, unusual health precautions. Berg also needed to gather information on which German and Italian scientists were still alive. So he started by finding a pair of Italians who had been mentored by Enrico Fermi, who at that point was well involved in the Manhattan Project in the States.
Mm-hmm.
Our own attempt to, build a nuclear bomb. One scientist speculated that the Germans were most likely studying nuclear fission and therefore working on an atomic bomb. The second of these two scientists felt that Heisenberg was most likely, quote, working on nuclear physics, and that while Heisenberg was not a Nazi, he was a patriot and loyal to his country. Berg reported this information to his superiors at the OSS, and they were quite impressed with his results and the way in which he got his work done. Now, in mid-December of 1944, both Heisenberg and Berg were working on new projects. Heisenberg was on a public lecture circuit in Europe, while Moberg received a new assignment directly from both Donovan and the Manhattan Project director. And we're going to hear a lot more about this guy in the coming months as the Christopher Nolan movie Oppenheimer comes to the forefront. The Manhattan Project director was General Leslie Groves. In a letter to Berg, Groves wrote, "At one time during the war, it was suggested to me by someone in the Manhattan organization, I think a scientist, that if I were fearful of German progress in the atomic field, I could upset it by arranging to have some of their leading scientists killed. I mentioned this to General Steyer one day and said to him, the next time you see General Marshall," and he was the chief of staff for the U.S. Army, "ask him what he thinks of such an idea." Sometime later, Steyer told me he had carried out my wishes and that General Marshall's reply had been, "Tell Groves to take care of his own dirty work." So in essence, Groves was like, "Proceed. So you're not saying you're not saying no."
All right.
So the idea was here, from Groves and Donovan, was that Berg was to attend Heisenberg's planned lecture in Zurich. And then Berg was to decide right there on the spot whether or not he should assassinate the physicist in the auditorium as he spoke.
Wow.
It would most likely be a suicide mission for both Berg and his OSS partner, a fellow by the name of Leo Martinuzzi. The two men would pose as Swiss physics students. So not only could he speak German, but he could speak German with a Swiss accent, which is pretty cool.
Right.
Berg was armed with a pistol. Hidden on his person was an L pill, the notorious potassium cyanide solution to the problem of imminent capture by enemy forces. You bite through the hard outer layer of your solution and your body is taken care of by potassium cyanide. It was supposed to be instantaneous.
It wasn't.
Sometimes it wasn't, and it was certainly not painless. He listened to the Heisenberg lecture while turning over the problem of what to do in his mind. Quote, "I am uncertain," he wrote. "See, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. What to do with him. Discussing math while Rome burns. If they only knew what I was thinking." He also noted that Heisenberg seemed to be pleased that someone was taking notes on his lecture. That night, Berg spared Heisenberg, deciding that the lecture, even though he really couldn't follow what was going on because it was about something called the S matrix, he decided that the lecture had nothing to do with an atomic bomb. A few days later, Berg found himself invited to a party with Heisenberg and other physicists at the home of Swiss scientist Paul Scherrer. When pressed, Heisenberg admitted out loud that he felt the war was lost for Germany. Quote, "Yes, but it would have been so good if we had won." Berg again gave Heisenberg the benefit of the doubt, seeing this admission of defeat as a sign that German scientists were not making advances on the atomic bomb front. Berg went to Heisenberg one more time, this time in personal conversation on a chilly walk outside, where he found the German disinterested in discussing nuclear physics and disinclined to further conversation on the matter. Berg's final message to Donovan read, "German separation of uranium-235 isotope absolutely hopeless." So three times he held Heisenberg's life in his hands.
Right.
Pretty biblical. Ask them 3 times, turn them away 3 times. So Berg was awarded the Medal of Freedom for his work with the OSS, which he did not accept. He resigned from the organization in 1946, but later attempted to gain assignment with the CIA in 1951. He desired a station in Israel. This was denied because the CIA preferred to use him for information gathering into the Soviet atomic program. This ongoing work yielded nothing viable for the CIA. Berg held no real occupation for the rest of his life, living with first his brother, and then after his brother kicked him out, his sister. He died as a result of injuries sustained in a fall at his sister's home in May of 1972. His last words were, and these will probably be my last words, "How did the Mets do today?" They won that day. He was 70 years old. His sister accepted the Medal of Freedom after Berg's death and donated it to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Mo Berg's baseball card is the only one displayed at CIA headquarters. Werner Heisenberg died February 1st, 1976, owing to kidney cancer. There was a movie made about this that I've not seen. I believe it's called The Catcher Was a Spy, starring, I believe, Paul Rudd.
Really?
As Mo Berg. I've never seen it. I don't know anything about it, but I read about that.
I've never heard of that. Yeah.
This story, and I'm going to pull one more story from this book. This came from the sources for this were Wikipedia for basic information, but the main source of this was a book I read on my recent trip. I read this pretty much on the plane flight. John, and I believe the last name is pronounced Lyle. It's Lisle. John Lyle's 2023 book, The Dirty Tricks Department, Stanley Lavelle, the OSS, and the Masterminds of World War II Secret Warfare, from St. Martin's Press of New York. A fantastic look at the early days of the CIA, the latter days of the OSS during the war, and the kind of things they came up with in order to try to win the war. I'm going to do one more story from this. It'll be next time. Because, I don't like to tell you all about a book. I advise you to get it if you're interested in this kind of history. It is fantastic. This is but one story. I mean, this is just one little peek behind the curtain as to the kind of things that these guys were doing. The book is really about how Stanley Lavelle changed, because he came in as kind of this, we've got to do it this way so we can save lives. And by the end of the war, he's like, no, we need to do this. We need to win this as quickly as we can. Early Stanley Lavelle would have been like, there's no way we can use an atomic bomb. By the end of the war, as I understand the book, the way it was written, he was like, no, we've got to use the bomb. Right. He really changed the way he looked at it. It's a fantastic book, of which Stanley Lavelle, Wild Bill Donovan, Mo Berg, and another cast of characters really go under the microscope, from John Lyle. Again, a recent book from 2023.
Very
and
cool.
That is the story of baseball player spy Mo Berg.
So did obviously, I guess Heisenberg must have learned. I mean, he lived long enough, must have learned that his life was in the balance there.
I don't know. That's an excellent question. I mean, he had to have at some point figured that out.
I mean, I would assume after the war there would have been some sort of correspondence or publication about it or something.
Because he died in 76, and I don't believe he ever left Europe. I think he died in in Munich. He died in Munich. He ended up going back. He was from Bavaria, and ended up dying in Munich. So he pretty much stayed in that part of the world. He very well could have lived the rest of his life without knowing.
Yeah, very cool. It's a great story. I mean, stories like that. I mean, I love that shit. I'm gonna go back and listen to the story and find that title and order that book.
Yeah, it's a great read, or you can just borrow it from me. I'll give it to you. It's fun.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that.
Yep, my pleasure. And now it's time for a choice word of the week.
It's time for the Dream Idiot's curse word of the week.
This comes actually. This person didn't know that they were giving me the curse word of the week, but friend of the pod, Ross texted me something. Bryan, are you familiar with the term coprolite?
Coprolite?
Coprolite.
It's fossilized dinosaur poop, right? Is it basically, isn't it?
It's any fossilized feces.
Okay, right.
It's coprolite. Very good. The coprolite part, the copra part is the poop part.
Right.
Ross sent me a brief little bit about the largest piece of human coprolite ever found.
Mm-hmm.
that they probably know of. It was discovered in 1972. The person was believed to have created this was most likely a Viking from where it was found.
Uh-huh.
A diet consisting mainly of meat and bread, 8 inches long and 2 inches wide.
Uh-huh.
So next time you're in the mood to call someone a name and you're tired of calling them a shithead or a jerk, you, my friend, are a raging piece of coprolite. And if you really want to throw it in there,
Viking coprolite.
you're a Viking coprolite. So thank you to regular listener of the pod, Ross, for providing our curse word of the week this week.
Very nice.
Coprolite.
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. You ready for mine?
I am ready because you've been talking this one up for a while now. So
okay.
What we got?
Well, I will warn you now that this story is not funny, but it is compelling and interesting in a few different ways, which will become self-evident here shortly. And I kind of wrote this story really 3 times in order to make more sense and have it be more cohesive. And so I worked on this pretty hard to make it have the presentation come across a little bit better, because it winds up being a fairly complex story. So we're going to talk about a woman named Allison Steele. She and her husband live in the southeast of Houston, and in the very, very late hours of October 29th, going into October 30th, 2017, they get a harrowing phone call. They are told by police that their daughter is in the hospital in, of all places, Kyle, Texas, and she is suffering from traumatic injuries. They are not really given much in the way of details, but they leap in their car and they drive the 3+ hours to Kyle, which is immediately south of Austin. It's an Austin suburb. Allison would later say that there was nothing about her daughter when she first saw her in the hospital that was even recognizable. You could see her long dark hair, but everything else was pretty much covered up with bandages and injuries. Every exposed patch of skin was bruised. She was intubated. She was on life support. Prior to arriving in Kyle, her daughter's life had to be saved 8 times with CPR. Remember this detail. It comes up again later on in the story. Allison wondered if her daughter had been thrown from a bridge or fallen from a plane. The injuries were that severe. Her daughter, Cayley Mandadi, was dying, although Allison didn't yet know this. At the time Allison reaches the hospital, we know the following about Cayley's condition. She'd been at a music festival in San Antonio, where she had a lot to drink and had taken large amounts of ecstasy. She left the music festival with her boyfriend. Some hours later, she is brought to a hospital in Luling, Texas, and the only part of her body that is not injured is her back and the backs of her legs. Luling can't handle this case, and she is life-flighted to Kyle. Her boyfriend, a guy named Mark Howerton, remains in the Luling hospital where he is interviewed by police. Medical staff and Kyle receive this poor girl. When she comes in, she's missing one toenail. She has one or more broken ribs. One eye is completely swollen shut. She is actively bleeding from her mouth, her nose, and one ear. And she is covered from head to toe with bruises and abrasions, basically all over the front of her body, with an emphasis on the inside of her thighs. Cayley grew up in the Houston area, Texas City, League City area, down southeast side of Houston. By all accounts, she's smart, she's sweet, she's a pretty popular girl, she has lots of friends. She's described as being bubbly and someone who can be relied upon to always do the right thing. In the fall of 2016, she starts college at Trinity University in San Antonio. Your alma mater and mine, although many moons earlier. She decides fairly quickly that she's going to major in communication. To everyone listening, Morris and I both have degrees in communication from Trinity University. She joins a sorority, and she's also a Trinity cheerleader, which begs the question, Trinity had cheerleaders? I don't remember ever seeing a cheerleader once in my 4 years there, but nevertheless. I mentioned she had very, very dark hair. Also worthy of note is that she had a fair complexion, and you'll understand why this is important a little bit later. And she appears in photos to be pretty small. She's one of those women who is like 5'4" and 100 pounds. So she's kind of a tiny girl. Starts her freshman year at Trinity and quickly has a boyfriend. His name is Jet Burcham. By all accounts, this is sort of a puppy love story for both of them. It's their first serious relationship, and mostly goes pretty well. Some folks report later that it's a bit volatile, but never violent. He's also a student at Trinity, and as we'll see later, he makes a little bit of money on the side as your friendly dormitory weed dealer. I point that out only because it comes up again later. Who gives a damn? Late in her freshman year, we're now in early 2017. Cayley meets Mark Howerton for the first time, and they begin dating as well. And for the subsequent few months, she's kind of going back and forth between the two of them, kind of half breaking up with the one and then half breaking up with the other. Both of these guys know about the other, and neither one of them are happy that the other guy exists, frankly. At some point, it's revealed that Jet is not returning to school in the fall at Trinity in the fall of 2017. So who is Mark Howerton? Basically, as far as I can tell, he's a full-time reprobate. He doesn't live in San Antonio. He at the time all this occurs, his residence is listed as being Tyler, Texas. As far as I can tell, he lives off family money. And at the time of Cayley's hospitalization, he's 22 years old. He's not in college. He's graduated high school at some point earlier. He was a prominent and gifted athlete, but now just spends daddy's money, drinks a lot, takes a lot of drugs, works out, and takes steroids. So he's a muscle-bound freak. And there are lots of pictures of him that he has posted online, shirtless. And frankly, he has the build of your average NFL linebacker. Strong douchebag vibe. You look at him and think this guy probably talks like Dog the Bounty Hunter a lot and uses the sentence, "Do you know who my dad is?" a lot. That kind of vibe. Pretty much my least favorite vibe of all. It becomes real clear to Jet and some others of Cayley's friends that this guy is unhinged and, frankly, quite happy to be violent. Early in the fall semester of 2017, friends of hers report that they had seen him throw her up against a wall, throw her against a car, slapped her on several occasions, shoved her on several occasions, and generally just been a huge ass. He would actively try to control where she went, who she saw, who she talked to. He would take away her cell phone. Occasionally, when the cell phone was in his possession, he would answer the phone and tell whoever was calling that she was not available. What's unclear, frankly, in some of this is how this all happened with him not really having a place to live. He did clearly probably stay in her dorm for some of this time. This is fifth floor of Thomas Hall. Ring a bell?
Thomas 8.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. But I mean, I fail to see how this would have been sustainable for any long period of time, but I guess it was. Roommates would have complained, and justifiably so. You can't just have, the gorilla boyfriend living in our suite now. Shortly before Cayley's hospitalization, she and her roommate were planning to go to a party. Mark is hanging out in their suite at the time and getting increasingly aggressive that he doesn't want them to go. Stunningly, in spite of his threats and his growing rage, they leave the room to go to the party and leave him behind in the suite. One of their suite mates, shortly thereafter, hears through two layers of brick. Hears yelling, cursing, swearing, and things being broken. She hears Mark yelling things that sound like threats. I'm going to break your face. I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to throw you off a balcony. But realizes no one is answering, and realizes he's by himself. She calls Trinity University campus security, and they arrive just in time to see Mark leaving the suite. Trinity security folks now actually have the chest cameras like police do. And so there actually is video footage of this exchange online, which I encourage you to go online and watch and enjoy. Mark tries to prevent them from entering the room because they want to, the officer says he wants to check and make sure everything is okay and nothing has been stolen, nothing is missing. Mark says nothing is missing and they have no legal right, no legal right to be there. And the officer says, well, you have no legal right to prevent me. This isn't your damn room.
In fact, where's your student ID? Who the hell are you?
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So Mark is asked, there are, I believe, 3 officers there. Mark is asked to come out and stand in the hallway. The first officer who engaged him goes into the room and find that Mark has completely trashed the place. Broken the sliding glass door, destroyed Cayley's property, destroyed roommate's property, smashed a laptop, and threw a bunch of Cayley's clothes off the balcony into the trees below. So then he's banned from the Trinity campus.
And this was, as I recall, these rooms were like 4 bedrooms that had a common living area. Is that right? Is that
some of the Thomas rooms were like most of the other suites. So you had two people on each side with the shared bathroom in the middle. But then some of the corner units in Thomas, there were 3 people in a room. So there were a 3 and a 2, as I recall. So I'm not sure which one she had. So this event, the whole mangling, destroying her dorm room, it's possible this is the event that makes Cayley decide it's time to break up with Mark. So she and Jet are texting about it around this time, and they agree that it would be better to do it in a public location in case he loses his mind, and you want to do it where there are as many witnesses as humanly possible. So there's a music festival coming.
Smart.
There's a music festival coming up. So not quite how she managed to hold it together until then, but they make it to the date of the music festival, which is October 28th. Mark is joined by one of his friends, and the 3 of them, Mark, the buddy, and Cayley, go to the festival. They take ecstasy beforehand, actually sneak in quite a bit of ecstasy into the festival. So they are drunk and high. So what? Right. Not slightly pertinent to the story, but who cares? Jet is actually at the festival too, and they actually run into each other. It's not clear if he's there to just kind of be her backup and support her, whether he was intending to go all along. Nevertheless, they actually do run into each other at the festival. And Mark, again, because he's roided up, becomes agitated and is now sort of visibly possessive and controlling of Cayley. They're walking around arm in arm, but it's not really a loving arm in arm. It's fire bad, you mine, kind of this vibe of holding on to her and not really letting her move away. So very possessive, and it was clear to Jet that Cayley is more and more uncomfortable. And from a distance, he's witnessing them having these animated, aggressive, unhappy conversations. So at some point prior to the end of the festival, Jet sees Mark and Cayley starting to leave, and it's clear to Jet yet again Cayley is leaving against her will. She's kind of being dragged a little, and in his statement later to the police and the grand jury, Jet would claim that Mark toward the end actually picked Cayley up and carried her to the car. She's tiny, he's a gorilla, completely possible, right? So as you'd expect, this is the part of the story where things start to get murky. Someone decides, presumably Mark, that they should drive to Houston right then. They're having a fight in the car, which Mark admits to. He would say in his initial statement to police when he's being interviewed in the hospital in Luling that they had a very heated argument, but I'm laughing half of this because this is so incredulous and obviously a fabrication and so damn stupid. They had a heated argument, but had made up and pulled over on the road and had rough makeup sex in the parking lot of a gas station, all within about an hour of where they left. They made it as far as Luling, which I looked on a map is 67 miles from the Trinity campus. So, okay, huge fight. You force this poor girl into your car, again, being aggressive and ridiculous and completely insane. She, I'm sure, is completely terrified of you. And somehow this fight gets blown over because she's trying to do whatever she can to calm you down. And then you have makeup sex. And of course, the best kind of makeup sex is rough makeup sex. And that happens in the parking lot of a gas station. Ah, true love, right?
Was it Love's gas station?
Apparently, he actually said apparently it was a Valero, so you're wrong.
Okay, so just for those of you who aren't from this area, that is about a third of the way from San Antonio to Houston. It's about 180 miles, right, from San Antonio to Houston.
Yeah, thereabouts. Yeah.
So for some reason they decided to take off and go from San Antonio to Houston, which is, if you're anywhere near the speed limit, is about a 3-hour drive.
Yeah, at least. Right.
And so they make it to Luling to have this makeup, which is all horseshit. This rough makeup sex in Luling, Texas, which is the exit is just off of I-10. Right. So that's where we are.
Right. Yeah. So
so far this story is taking us basically but basically what I was just trying to do is, if you're thinking about a triangle, you've got Houston, San Antonio, and then Austin. Right. So we're going to be going all around this triangle in this story.
Yes.
Is what you're telling me.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
And then Kyle is straight north of Luling, probably only about 30 miles. It's not that far away, really. It's up, it's just south of Austin. So fairly close by. So
right. Okay.
They're on the road. They pull over. Fight is over. Rough makeup sex. Apparently, they're great now, right? They're a couple in love. Mark says when he's in that initial interview in the Luling hospital that about 5 or 6 minutes after they're done having sex, Cayley either falls asleep or passes out. He keeps driving. And oh yeah, by the way, she apparently passes out in the front seat of his luxury sedan. It's either a BMW or Mercedes, I forget which. And she's either nude or partially nude when she passes out, because that's what all women do after rough sex in what could be cool or cold weather, late October in Texas. I mean, it doesn't get that cold here. Yeah, of course you're going to fall asleep all exposed in cold weather after you've just been roughed up by a gorilla. So does she try to cover up? No. Does she put her clothes back on or pull her pants up? Apparently no. Doesn't really add up. At some point thereafter, he can hear her breathing / snoring. He realizes she stops making any noise and isn't making any sound at all. So she's not breathing. Mark pulls off the highway, and a judge fairly quickly is able to find that hospital I mentioned in Luling. When he pulls in, he's flashing his lights, honking his horn, whatever. There's an EMT walking out who had just dropped off another patient. Goes to his car, opens the passenger door. Cayley's there. This EMT would say later, semi-nude in the front seat, not breathing. They begin treatment there. The EMT noted under oath that she could see. I mean, basically her top is pulled up. her panties and pants are pulled down, and it's immediately evident there is extensive bruising on the inside of Cayley's thighs. CPR started. She's wheeled into the hospital, obviously, immediately. Luling, staff there decides real quickly that they're not equipped to help her. So this is, I find it hard to believe that in 2017, you have to life flight someone out. But they quickly decide, nope, she needs to go up the road to Kyle. She's life flighted up. Mark stays behind. And that's where he's questioned by police, and that's where he conveys this rough sex story. He also acknowledges having slapped Cayley on several occasions in the past. He's quick to point out he's making this important distinction that he does not punch her; he only slaps her. Because that.
Oh, good man.
Right.
Good,
Yeah,
what a
right.
dick.
But he does says rough sex is something that is very, very common in their relationship, and that everything that happened that evening was consensual. Call me crazy, I'm not a medical expert. Can you go from being a conscious and active participant in some sort of consensual sex act and then be passed out 6 minutes later? In my book, the answer to that is probably no. So we go back now to October 30th, and Cayley is in the hospital in Kyle with her mother. Her mother is notified that Cayley is brain dead. They feel confident that she would want to be.
Jesus Christ.
They are confident she'd want to be an organ donor. She is taken off life support. She dies on Halloween Day, and several of her organs are removed and donated. So the investigation then into this begins. Frankly, in my book, having listened to a bunch of other true crime stories and watched enough 48 hours to know, it kind of goes a little slower than it should have. In Cayley's autopsy, the breathtaking extent of her injuries is really laid out. The medical examiner makes it super clear that method of death is without a doubt blunt force trauma, and it is absolutely a homicide. About 2 months later, 2 months after her death, Mark surrenders himself. He's charged with murder, aggravated assault, and kidnapping. So we flash forward. 2019 is when this case goes to trial. Most of these details I've kind of spelled out already in the story. It's not worth going into them a whole bunch again. The medical examiner testifies to her injuries, and then the insanity and depravity of this guy is laid out. Several of her friends testify regarding his abuse and his manipulation. Cayley did say on at least one occasion apparently to Jet in a text message that, quote, Mark will probably kill me before this is over,
Jesus
unquote.
Christ.
And the prosecution seems quite confident that this case is kind of open and shut. Then Jet, the freshman boyfriend, is called to testify, and we have a small problem. During the discovery process, the defense, Mark's defense, was given text messages between Jet and Cayley and a couple other people. And they also discovered, as part of that, several images on his phone. He had pictures on his phone of marijuana. I don't know why. Because he's dealing, but he just takes a beating on the stand. And by virtue of the fact that he's a dealer, he winds up pleading the fifth 30 times during his questioning by Mark's attorney, which is weird, even because Jet at this point in time already has a plea agreement in place. His mistake was kind of simple but a little bit damning. In his initial statements to police, he indicated he saw Mark pick Cayley up and carry her to the car. He was trying to make a stronger case. This is a girl that he loves. He was exaggerating. But then he felt trapped with this story and felt like he had to repeat it. And so he did repeat it to the grand jury. And then they indicted Mark on kidnapping charges, but they shouldn't have. During the course of the trial, Jet then has to acknowledge, as part of his plea agreement, he had to acknowledge that he had lied initially in his statement and lied to the grand jury. It's unclear why he pled the fifth so many times, because he had a plea agreement in place that basically says, you're whatever, you a slap on the wrist, or your record will be wiped clean. So but you have to testify in this case. But he just pled the fifth. But his credibility takes a gigantic hit. So the jury now might question everything he has to say. Even with this setback, prosecution seems pretty confident. Abusive boyfriend, lots of injuries, lots of trauma, sweet girl who's super smart with lots of friends and is going places, is dead. Maybe we don't get the kidnapping, but we'll certainly get everything else, right? So they seem pretty confident. Until Mark's defense team steps up. So first and foremost, the defense says that Cayley's bruising was all related to the attempts to save her life via CPR. All the manipulation of her body in an ambulance, in the helicopter, at the second hospital, to intubate her, to defibrillate, whatever they had to do to move her body around just to keep her heart pumping, is the source of all of those bruises. This is, of course, complete horseshit. They also then try to say that there was, likely could have been bruising to her body during the organ removal process because organs were taken for donation. They also tried to say that she certainly did have a brain injury, but an expert came in and said that this injury was likely sustained or could have been sustained at some point prior to Mark having been in her presence. It could have happened that morning. It could have happened the week before, or the day before, even though there's no evidence to suggest she had had a fall. She hadn't gone to the nurse. No one saw her fall. She hadn't complained of being dizzy. This expert swears up and down that she has a skull fracture on the top of her skull. And the only way you get a skull fracture in this location is from a fall. It couldn't be from a punch, a backhand, an implement, or anything. It has to be from a fall. Utter nonsense. I'm not a big drug guy. I don't claim to understand the nuances of drug interactions, etc. But they have another expert come on that says if you take a boatload of ecstasy, you're going to have radically elevated blood pressure, and that could have been the cause of all the bruising, and that by itself could have caused a fatal brain bleed. I know things like blood thinners will enhance the odds of you getting bruises. I mean, you brush against something lightly and you get a bruise because you're on a blood thinner. My mother, who's on a blood thinner, is bruised all the time, and she has no idea where they come from. Right? Again, I don't really have a strong sense of how viable that argument is, but again, they definitely tried to make it. And then finally, the third argument is Jet's a big fat liar. He's selling drugs on campus. He lied about the kidnapping. He's lying about all this bullshit. You can't believe a word that Jet says, even though it's echoed by several of her friends as well. So after the jury has the charge, another witness calls in to the defense to say they want to testify, but the judge doesn't allow it. We find out later that there is someone in the admitting area at the hospital in Luling. They swear up and down that they remember Cayley coming through, Cayley having a very, very fair complexion, but Cayley didn't have any bruises on her whatsoever. And this is the exact opposite of what the EMT had to say, but the jury never hears this. Judge doesn't allow it. So Mark is facing life in prison, justifiably so. He should probably have his testicles removed painfully as well, as far as I'm concerned. The jury is out for 10 hours, and they come back and they say, any guess?
Am I going to be disappointed?
I don't know.
They say not guilty.
They're deadlocked. They can't come to a verdict.
Well, you could have said yes. Who roots for a deadlock?
They are. Yeah, the judge declares a mistrial. They
actually who does vote for a deadlock? Astons Alderberry, that bastard. Astons Alderberry votes for a deadlock.
Well, in this case, the defense, I think, frankly, saw this as a victory. So that's 2019.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. Yeah, my guy's out. Right. He's not going to jail. So pandemic then hits, first part of 2020, and court proceedings everywhere slow down to a snail's pace. And Mark's defense attorneys file an appeal that basically states that jeopardy has attached, even though it was a mistrial. Why? Well, they're trying to say that the prosecution was relying so heavily on a witness that they knew was lying that the prosecution shouldn't be entitled to a second attempt at prosecuting Howerton. It's clever, it's evil, and the defense counsel is told to fuck off. Basically, no, you can, that's, mistrial is mistrial, and jeopardy has not attached. Prosecutors, you may proceed with attempt number 2. So fast forward even more, because there's the backlog has to be cleared out, and Mark goes back on trial the second time in Bear County on May 23rd of this year.
Why Bear County?
I wondered about that, frankly. I mean, I guess they tried to allege that some of the crime, the beating, may have still happened in Bear County, but obviously Luling is not in Bear County, Kyle's not in Bear County, so I'm not really sure. Is the short answer.
But the music festival, Bear County, for those of you who don't know, is San Antonio's is center of Bear County. So
right,
because the music festival was there, maybe, or
yeah, I mean,
that's where the crime started, or
I guess that's where they're claiming the crime started. So second trial, I judge, kind of goes in much the same way as the first. In the second time around, there's a Texas Ranger that comes in also to testify, saying he collected DNA from Mark's car, and there's blood and male DNA in the car. And I read this stuff and didn't understand exactly why it was relevant. Mark saying that they had sex, it's his car, so he could have blood or semen or hair in this car anyway. They're not trying to say someone else had sex with the car, unless they're trying to say, they do try to make the claim. The second time around, defense tries to say maybe Jet did the whole thing, which of course is complete nonsense. But they find male DNA. So what? I'm not trying to minimize. I mean, it's clear that sex happened. I'm not trying to minimize the fact that it's clear that she suffered. I mean, I think it is virtually assured that nothing consensual happened at all. But in my mind, if she was raped as well as killed, the killing part's the really important part. And so, we have this girl that is dead for no reason, but defense again, tries to, say that Jet does it, or the ecstasy does it, or, who knows what. But, please don't convict Mark, because he's a really nice guy. Jury number 2 is given the case. We went to trial on the 23rd. Given the case just a few days later, it's these same charges: murder, kidnapping, and assault. Second time around, did you want to guess, or should I just tell you?
Guilty, hopefully.
Well, happily half and half. He's acquitted on murder. This jury believes that something else may have actually caused the death, but he is convicted of the assault. And so family and the prosecution they're not thrilled, but he's going to get spanked here, or at least a little bit. And the sentencing for this will happen literally any day now. It's supposed to happen 10 days after the verdict, which is, I think, is going to be this week. The one thing that makes me cringe a tiny bit is the range he could face is 2 to 20 years. Like, yeah, give him 20 years.
No, because he needs to be away as long as possible.
Yeah.
Give
him 20 years, because he'll, in Texas, he'll be out in 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there, probably. He'll probably serve half of that, at most. But hopefully he'll be gone for a long time, because it's asswipes like this that do it over and over and over again. But we'll be back again soon. I mean, hopefully, as soon as there actually is the sentencing is passed down, we will give an update on how long Mr. Howerton is going to be a guest of the state of Texas. And as an aside, if you know anyone who is, I mean, this is just the manipulation and bullshit even before he started actually physically beating her. If you know anyone engaging in this sort of behavior or is a victim of it, there are resources in every city and every county and, across this country. So avail yourself of services that are out there to prevent people like this from doing this.
Wow, Bryan. You're right. That wasn't
Not that funny.
no. I will say that when in Luling, visit Croot's Meat Market with some of the best barbecue in Texas.
Is that in Luling or is that?
I thought it was. There's Luling and there's
Luling and Lockhart. Yeah,
Luling and Lockhart and all those.
Yeah.
Um,
Lots of barbecue. Yeah. So
yeah, this story was on my radar because the Trinity connection, but I never really dug into it. That's just awful. I was under the impression that he was a student, but I guess I was confusing him with Jet.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought he was a student as well, and where he was really living this whole time, I don't know, but the fact that
Well, you said Tyler's.
Yeah, 5 hours away, 4 hours
Yeah,
away.
that's
So I mean, has no job. So all he did was just obsess over this poor girl and stalk her around campus, as far as I can tell. And she couldn't do anything about it. I read also that her mother is actually I didn't see if this got resolved. At some point, her mother filed a lawsuit against Trinity University, basically saying, fuck you. She needed to have more resources, more support than this. After the whole dorm room got destroyed, they were going to Cayley's parents looking for money to repair the room. It's like, what? She wasn't even in the room when it happened.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
really?
Yeah. And so she at some point filed a lawsuit against Trinity for $1 million, basically say, yeah, pound sand, assholes. Because I mean, just like people always say, mental health is health. I mean, this isn't, I guess it doesn't fall under healthcare, but this is as critical as healthcare to college students is safe, safe passage, safe quarter, right? I mean, just absurd. And Trinity, my illustrious alma mater, who I've never given a dime to, managed to managed to show themselves again by reveal themselves to care only about themselves, which they do all the time, in my estimation.
That's
Go Tigers.
That's just that's unconscionable.
Yeah.
And security, I mean, no one caught that he was there. Security, the RA, nobody caught that.
Yeah, I mean, well, the guy's such a hothead. He must have had run-ins. I mean, guys like that, you look cross-eyes at him, and they do the what, right? I mean, because he's a big dumb gorilla, and he's suffering from mental health crisis of his own and roid rage. So he had to. I mean, there has to have been, I would guess, numerous conflicts, run-ins, incidents, whatever. His name is all over those Trinity security reports, I bet, because he follows her to the library, and then whatever, and then some other dude looks at Cayley, and he and there's some minor confrontation. I guarantee you, there must be dozens of those.
That's who you should put in charge of the securities, the librarians. They won't put up with that horseshit. You cannot take that out of special collections. You cannot take that out of. That's a reference book. You can't take that. And that's a strange. Isn't that the same stretch of road coming across where that guy disappeared from Texas State a few years back?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's the same like little Texas triangle there where the guy just vanished off
good
the
old
side of the
Luling.
road.
Yep. Jason Landry.
That's something we need to dig into at some point. Is the Jason Landry case?
Who is still missing? Well, we may one day.
Well, on that note,
there you have it. Yeah. So now, interesting story. Not really a funny story, but I hope people liked our. We keep saying that we're not a true crime podcast, but we keep delving into it. So, hope people like that, and especially like the outcome.
Well, it's just, it's awful. It's just all the way around.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for
There you have it.
listening, folks.
Yeah.
We'll
Keep
be back
listening
next
and
week with more stuff.
more stuff. And yeah, like and subscribe at Dream Idiots on Facebook and Instagram. Shoot us an email if you want, especially if you got like a suggestion or a curse word or something you want us to dive into, because we will. And thanks for everything that you're doing for us.
Yes, indeed. And be extra good to each other after this one. Be extra nice to each other. Thanks.
This is a Rough Tiger production.
Bong bong,
Mhm.
Brian.
Bong bong?
Bong bong.
Bong bong. Good.